Hello witchy people, we are back again for another segment of the YouTube Pagan Challenge 2019, the ABC of mythology. Once again I'm trying to keep it quite local, national sort of thing, and I decided on the myth of Catskin. Now Catskin is an old English fairy tale, if you like, very similar to that of Cinderella. It's very, very old, and it tells of the story of a king who had a daughter, and he didn't want a daughter, he wanted a son, so he kind of ignored her a little bit. And then when she was 15 he decided to marry her off to the first available suitor. Really, he just wanted rid, and he chose what he thought was a suitable husband for her, and she didn't like him. So she went to the local henwife, the local wise woman, and she said, "You have to help me." And the wise woman said to her, "Go back to your father and ask him and your suitor to make you a cloak woven of silver cloth." So she did it. The next day she went back to the wise woman and she said, "Nothing's happened. They still want to marry me off. What do I do now?" And the wise woman said to her, "Go and ask them to make you a cloak of woven gold." So she did. Nothing happened. They made her the cloak, but still they wanted her to marry. So she went back to the wise woman. This was just 2 days before her wedding, and she said to the wise woman, "Please, you have to help me. What do I do?" And the wise woman said, "You ask them to make you a cloak from all the feathers of all the birds in the land." So she went back and she asked them to do that, and they did. But still, the wedding was on. So on the eve of her wedding, she went to see the wise woman again, and she said, "Please, this is my last chance. What do I do now?" And the wise woman said, "You ask them to make you a coat made of catskin." So she did. And that evening, as she wore her catskin coat, she ran back to the wise woman. She said, "Look, they still want me to marry." And the wise woman said, "You take your cloaks and you run." So she did. The princess ran away with her cloaks and her little catskin coat, and she found herself a position in another castle in another land as a scullery maid. And she was doing quite well there. The cook hated her, but cooks are like that. Anyway, one day there was a plan of a huge ball to be held at this castle. And Catskin, as she had become to be known, they called her Catskin because she arrived in the castle in a catskin, wanted to go and have a look. And the cook said, "No, don't be silly." And she threw a bowl of water in her face. Undeterred, Catskin put on her cloak of silver and went to the ball. And there she met the prince, who instantly fell in love with her. But before the night was out, she had to go back to being a scullery maid, so she ran back, put on her catskin coat and carried on doing her job as a scullery maid. Well, the prince was so determined to meet this lady again that he held another ball in the hope that she would turn up. And once again, Catskin asked, "I want to go and look at the ball. I want to see who's there." And the cook laughed at her and broke a wooden spoon over her back and said, "Don't be silly, this is not for people like you." And nevertheless, being the defiant, rebellious young lady that she was, Catskin then put on her cloak of gold and went to the ball. I should say, I think the throwing water in her face and the breaking a ladle over her back had something to do with, I think they said, when the prince asked her where she came from, she said the sign of the water, or something like that, after the water being thrown in her face. And when the prince asked her this time, when he saw her in a cloak of gold, "Who are you? Where do you come from?" she said, "The sign of the broken ladle, or snapped ladle." And then, of course, she snuck off again. Well, on the third night, the third ball, I should say, the prince once again had to hold another ball because he wanted this woman to come back. He was so smitten with her. So he held another ball, and of course she turned up in her cloak made of all the birds' feathers of the land. After the cook had told her that she couldn't go and broken a sieve over her back. And when the prince asked her, "Where do you come from? Please tell me where you come from." She said, "I come from the sign of the snapped sieve." Something along those lines. And then once again, at the end of the evening, disappeared back to her place. Only this time the prince followed her. And as she went down to the kitchens, he saw her change into her catskin coat. And then went up to his mother and father and said, "I'm going to marry Catskin. This is the lady I love, and this is the lady I'm going to marry." And of course the mother was not pleased at all, and she forbade it completely. Whereupon the prince decided that he was going to fall into a terrible illness unless his mother agreed. So in the end she said, "Okay then, if you want to marry this person, fair enough." And when Catskin appeared to her with her gold cloak on, the queen then changed her mind and said, "Oh, absolutely, you can marry my son. You know, look at this lovely cloak. You're absolutely beautiful. You can get married." Well, years passed, and Catskin and the prince had a son. And one day a beggar came to the door, an old beggar woman came to the door, and Catskin sent her son out to give the beggar woman and her child some money. And the cook made quite a joke about how beggar children could get along together. And Catskin realised this was the beggar woman, the hen wife, and she said, "Please, how is my father?" And the woman didn't know. So Catskin sent her husband, the prince, who became king, obviously, out across the lands to find out what happened to her father. And the prince came across Catskin's father, and he had no other children. His wife had died, and he was alone. And the prince, without telling Catskin's father who he was, said, "Do you have any children? Do you have a son?" And he said, "No, I had a daughter. But I mistreated her terribly, and I would give everything I owned and more to know that she was safe and to see her once again." Upon which the prince revealed who he was and took the king back to his castle to see his daughter, and met Catskin and her child, and they all lived happily ever after. That is the legend and the myth of Catskin, told in a rather awkward way. I do have a terrible, terrible cold. So there we go. That is my YouTube Pagan challenge, letter C. Catskin. I was going to choose Cernabus, but that was quite a difficult one actually, because no one quite knows. If I do this twice this year again, I will probably go back to that. But no one knows exactly when Cernabus was built, made, unlike the White Horse. Anyway, perhaps I should have chosen chalk figures. That would have been fine, wouldn't it? Anyway, thank you for watching. That was the YouTube Pagan Challenge 2019, letter C, and my letter C was Catskin. Bye for now, witchy people.